I love the Victorian era and I love journaling. And I picked up this book, How Romantics and Victorians Organized Information. Today I want to share the most useful information that I picked up from this book, so let's dive in. First of all, this book was written by Jillian M. Hess, and it's about commonplace books, scrapbooks, and albums, which interested me enormously. If you don't know, commonplace books are this kind of journal, and you just write everything that you want to write down about a certain topic. They are used to gather information and to make sure that we don't lose what we want to remember. Commonplacing has undergone many changes and also many name changes. The commonplace book became increasingly specific and personal. A commonplace book was also called a flycatcher, and I really love the ring of it. George Eliot, the author of Middlemarch, she called her commonplace book a quarry, and Walter Scott used the traditional Latin name called adversaria. Commonplacing was something new and something rare, but as more and more people started doing it, it became less respected. In fact, commonplacing was reserved for classically educated men, and in the 19th century suddenly commonplacing was for everyone, and once it spread to all economic classes, it became devalued, especially when women started using it too. This book shares a lot of examples from real people who have been journaling, and here's what they had to say about why you should keep a commonplace book. Number one, when you write things down and annotate, you can reflect on how your thoughts and feelings have changed over time or hasn't. So it's kind of this self-reflection as you go through your older notes to see how much you have changed of opinions. And I do find this interesting because I have been journaling all my life since I was a child. And when I go through my notes of while I was a teenager, it is so surprising to see how much I changed, and I think this is absolutely true. The second one, they train your writing skills. Absolutely true. Number three, you can quote a text or a beautiful sentence that you saw and then comment on that quote. Another advice was, over the course of our life, we lose many thoughts that were actually worth preserving. And this is something that I realized the last few years, is that I watch so many videos, documentaries, I listen to so many podcasts packed with useful information, and I just realized I never wrote anything down. And if I would have written, oh my gosh, my cat is being crazy, I'm sorry. And I just realized when I would have written down everything I learned from those podcasts and YouTube videos and documentaries, and if I would have just reread them from time to time, the information would have stayed with me so much better. I cannot imagine how many things I have forgotten over the years, and this is why commonplacing and journaling is so effective and why it's really worth putting in the time. Next, George Eliot filled her commonplace notebooks with historical research. She began commonplacing at the age of 17 as a student. For Middlemarch, she kept 3 different commonplace books. So you can also keep your commonplace or journal for a special project. If you're an author, you can use it for research. Isaac Watts said, commonplace books provide a record of intellectual growth. Students should review their notes weekly, monthly, or yearly. This will allow students to measure their progress. Amazing. I will share some interesting and thought-provoking quotes at the end of the video, but first of all, I want to share my opinion on this book. What I immediately noticed is that it is written in a difficult to consume way. It requires focus, deep reading, and sometimes even rereading. It isn't so much a topic that is challenging, but just the writing style that the author has chosen. Maybe this is because English isn't my first language, but I have found it very challenging. But then again, I read a lot of old literature, classics, and when I say I found it difficult to digest, I think there's some truth in there. So let me give you an example. I'm just going to read an entry of a chapter called The Diary and the Romantic Paradox. Diaristic entries encroached upon commonplace books' form in response to a distinctly romantic episteme that found knowledge by turning inward. Romantics like Coleridge rejected the empiricist foundation of passive perception and shifted their attention to the mind's inner workings. Titles like Taylor and Hess's The Literary Diary, discussed in the previous chapter, demonstrates how commonplacing became more personalized. This resonates with romantic theorizations of the imagination, which asserted that a writer's internal world always mediated perceptions of the external world. This idea, advanced by Immanuel Kant, amounted to an epistemic upheaval. So here you have an example of the writing style. What I found most interesting to read were the excerpts of the journals of the people that were journaling at the time, and I found that their thoughts were oftentimes aligning with mine. Now I want to talk a bit about what I didn't like so much about it. First of all, I was slightly bothered that the author often strayed from the main topic, being commonplacing, and often digressed to topics inside of the commonplace books and journals. I did find it interesting to read what these people at the time journaled about, but then the author of the book went on and on about certain topics. For example, there were discussions of poetry that were inside commonplace books, fingerprints and how they became a proof of identity, the origin of the locks of hair, and every time that the author digressed from the actual topic of journaling and commonplacing, I was a little bit annoyed. By the way, people kept locks of hair and fingerprints inside their journals, but what they valued most of all was someone's handwriting, because it felt so more personal, and I think that's something really beautiful, to collect people's handwriting. Isn't that a great idea? By the way, they sometimes tore out pages from a book to glue them into their own commonplace book. I cannot imagine ever doing such a thing. Lastly, I want to say that I think this book is written for readers who are extremely interested in the Victorian era and in commonplacing, because it is not a casual read and it is not addictive due to the writing style. I thought I would fly through this book because I'm so interested in this topic, but the writing style made it nearly impossible, and it didn't give me this drive to keep going. Now, let me give you some quotes. In the matter of notebooks, I am sure that it is best for everyone to make notes in the way best suited to his convenience. Some might find copying extracts an inconvenience. Others are so concerned with tidying their notebooks that they miss out on the true purpose of reading, which is to acquire knowledge. This resonates so much with me, because in all of the years that I've been journaling, I really had to find out what worked for me. I noticed when I kept my journaling to a minimalistic style, and I mean by this that I didn't do drawings, I didn't do artwork, I just wrote down my thoughts without going overboard on decorations, because I have been having this period of wanting to make my page so beautiful with stickers and, drawings and everything. But I noticed it kept me from picking up my journal, because I knew that it would take me so much time to do an entry, because I wanted it to be pretty. And I realized this wasn't a way that I wanted to approach journaling. So the point is, you will have to find your own style, and especially something that works for you, that makes you want to journal more often. The second quote I loved: "Books are not inanimate objects, but company." And this was said by Leigh Hunt. Next quote: "It is not enough to simply read. One must work over material to turn it into something useful," was said by Coleridge. I love this quote so much, because this is something that I also learned as I have been journaling about the books that I read, I read much more deeply since I've been journaling about what I read. And this is like the whole point of Coleridge, saying that you must, reflect on the material that you're consuming. And then there was also this quote about rather than pastimes, they ought to be considered kill times. So someone was explaining the difference between a pastime and a kill time, and I had never before heard of this concept. Like, I really love it. Some things that I see as kill times are like watching television, and a pastime would be reading. Let me know in the comments what your experience is with commonplacing, and I will see you in the next video.